Welcome to the deep dive. We take mountains of information, distill it down, and hopefully give you the most essential, maybe mind-bending insights.
That's the plan.
And today, we're plunging into something really fundamental. It's about how societies are built, basically. The complex, often, let's be honest, fiery interplay of economic systems, capitalism, socialism, and communism.
Yeah, it definitely sparks debate. And our mission today is, well, to pull out those vital nuggets of knowledge. We've got a really diverse stack of sources, articles, research, our notes.
A lot of reading.
A lot of reading. And the goal is to give you a thorough, well-informed understanding, maybe with some surprising facts, and just enough humor to keep you hooked, hopefully.
We've tried to custom tailor this deep dive from like a huge collection of materials, looking at everything from the basic economic principles to major historical events, their impacts, and of course the criticisms these systems have faced throughout history.
That's a big topic.
It is. So are you ready to unpack this?
Absolutely. Let's dive in. So when we talk economic systems, the one that probably springs to mind first for many people is capitalism.
Yeah, dominant in many places.
Exactly. And the material we looked at often frames it as like the engine of growth.
Okay, engine of growth. That's a strong statement. What are its core principles based on the research?
Well, at its heart, it's about individualism, free market principles, competition. Think Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, way back in 1776.
A classic.
Right. And he argued that individual self-interest, when it operates in open markets, acts like an invisible hand. It unintentionally benefits society.
Like your drive to make a better widget helps everyone who needs widgets.
Pretty much. Your desire to create the best podcast, for example, theoretically improves the listening experience for everyone. It's that kind of idea.
Okay, I can get behind that. So competition is really key here.
It's central. Competition is seen as the main driver for innovation, better productivity, efficient resource allocation, all guided by prices, supply and demand.
And historically, where did this really take off?
Well, its roots go way back to mercantilism, late Middle Ages, that kind of thing. But it really exploded with the Industrial Revolution.
18th, 19th centuries.
Yeah, exactly. That fostered mass production, totally new market dynamics, changed everything.
Okay, so this is where it gets interesting. What are the advantages the sources point to? Because we've certainly seen incredible growth.
We have. And the sources consistently highlight that capitalism can promote rapid economic development, raise living standards significantly. You see that in many 20th century capitalist countries.
And innovation.
Huge driver of innovation. This pursuit of profit has just propelled technological advancement like crazy. I mean, think about Apple, Google. These giants are, in a way, products of this system.
It's kind of wild how deeply embedded it is in the tech we use daily, isn't it?
It really is. And beyond that, it creates strong incentives for individuals, for businesses to maximize efficiency, productivity. Private property rights are a big part of that incentive structure.
Right, ownership matters.
It does. And another big point is job creation. We saw this stat that venture-backed companies, for instance, apparently create jobs like 4.5 times faster than others.
Wow, 4.5 times. That's significant.
That's a powerful metric, yeah.
Okay, but nothing's perfect. Let's get into the inherent drawbacks. What does the research consistently flag?
And this is where it gets complex, right? A major one is income inequality. The market, left to itself, doesn't ensure fair wealth distribution. It often creates big disparities.
Which can lead to social problems.
Absolutely. Social unrest, instability, and vulnerability, too.
Yeah.
Unregulated financial markets can be really unstable. Think the Great Depression in the U.S., 1930s. A stark reminder.
And I guess that relentless profit motive can have other side effects, too.
For sure. Like the commercialization of essential services, healthcare, education. If it's purely market-driven, it can block access for lower-income people, right? It can perpetuate poverty cycles.
Makes sense.
And sometimes that profit pursuit can lead to unethical behavior, exploitation. The Ford Pinto case from the 70s is often cited.
Oh, yeah, the exploding gas tanks.
Exactly, where cost-cutting tragically trumps safety. It's a grim example. Plus, you have the potential for monopolies, environmental damage if short-term profits are the only goal.
That Ford Pinto example does stick with you. Okay, so that's capitalism in broad strokes. What about socialism, often seen as the counterpoint?
It is. And the material often frames it as the quest for equity. The core idea is collective or government ownership of the means of production factories, land, resources.
And the main goal.
Prioritizing social welfare over individual profit. The vision is a fairer distribution of resources across society. More equality, basically.
When did this really start to emerge as a distinct idea?
Mostly in the 19th century. It was a direct reaction to the inequalities and, frankly, the exploitation people saw happening under industrial capitalism.
So figures like Marx and Engels.
Definitely. Their Communist Manifesto in 1848 was huge. They criticized capitalism's class struggle, envisioned a society with collectively owned means of production, aimed to end worker alienation.
And what were the intended benefits? According to proponents, why pursue this model?
Well, the main aim is to reduce income inequality, create more social stability. Proponents argue it provides universal access to essentials, healthcare, education.
Leading to a healthier, more educated population.
That's the idea. And John Maynard Keynes' ideas, though not purely socialist, influenced this. His work in the 30s advocated for government intervention to boost demand, cut unemployment. Many welfare state policies borrowed from that thinking.
Okay, so if socialism is about collective ownership and welfare, how does communism differ? Where does it take things?
Communism aims for, well, a completely classless society. It involves the total abolition of private property, replacing it with collective ownership of everything.
That's a radical step beyond socialism.
It is, heavily influenced by Marx and Engels, who called for revolution to overthrow capitalism. Later, Vladimir Lenin adapted these theories, introducing the idea of a vanguard party.
A leading group.
Yeah, a disciplined elite party to lead the working class, the proletariat, in that revolution and establish the new system.
Okay, so we've got the basic ideas mapped out. Capitalism, socialism, communism. Now let's shift to the real world, because the sources make it clear implementing these theories. It's full of challenges, failures, and sometimes terrible human costs.
Yeah, the theory versus practice gap can be vast.
Let's start with centrally planned economies. What defines them?
So these are marked by extensive government ownership of pretty much all resources. Decision-making is centralized, usually by state planning agencies.
Like the Soviet Gosplan.
Exactly. And crucially, market forces, supply and demand dictating prices are largely absent. The state decides what gets produced, how much, and often at what price.
Intuitively, that sounds difficult. To manage an entire economy from the center. What were the problems?
You hit it right there. Historical examples consistently show bureaucratic rigidity. Things move slowly. There's often a lack of innovation because the profit incentive isn't really there.
Right. Why take risks?
Precisely. You also see persistent shortages of some goods, weird surpluses of others, and it tends to suppress individual entrepreneurial spirit.
And wasn't there a famous critique about information?
Ah, yes. Friedrich Hayek's knowledge problem from 1945. His argument was brilliant, really. He said no central planner, no matter how smart or well-intentioned, could possibly gather and process all the local specific knowledge held by millions of individuals and businesses.
Like knowing exactly what people in some small town actually want or need.
Exactly. That dispersed knowledge is crucial for efficient allocation. Without market prices to signal that information, central planning inevitably leads to inefficiency, waste, and often public dissatisfaction.
That makes a lot of sense. A central body just can't know everything. So looking at the case studies in our sources, the Soviet Union looms large, doesn't it?
Immensely so. It really exemplified many of those central planning inefficiencies. And tragically, despite massive industrialization efforts, it suffered catastrophic famines under Stalin.
And later on,
the economy really stagnated in the 1970s and 80s. Most analysis points to the lack of market competition, leading to poor quality goods, chronic shortages. Its collapse in 1991 is often seen as, well, Exhibit A for the limits of that kind of rigid socialist model.
And the human cost under Stalin.
Terrible. The Great Purge in the late 30s involved mass executions, forced labor camps, just brutal political repression on a massive scale.
A truly dark period.
Yeah.
What about China under Mao Zedong? The sources mention some major upheavals.
Yes. The Great Leap Forward, 1958 to 62. It was Mao's attempt at rapid industrialization through collectivizing agriculture and creating backyard furnaces.
How'd that go?
Disastrously. It led to a catastrophic famine. Estimates vary, but we're talking somewhere between 15 and 45 million deaths. Just devastating economic dislocation.
15 to 45 million, that's staggering.
It is. And then came the Cultural Revolution, 66 to 76. More widespread repression, social chaos, destruction of cultural heritage. another incredibly turbulent and destructive period.
Moving to more recent times, Venezuela's economic story has been quite prominent.
Yeah, and it's a really tragic one. Despite having huge oil wealth, the country experienced a total economic collapse.
What went wrong there?
The sources point primarily to mismanagement, extreme over-reliance on oil money, and a failure to diversify the economy. This led to hyperinflation. I mean, the IMF reported rates like 10 million% in 2019.
10 million%. That's almost unimaginable.
It destroys an economy. Severe shortages of food, medicine, essentials. Public services collapsed. Millions fled the country. And the regimes under Chavez and then Maduro became increasingly authoritarian, dismantling checks and balances, suppressing dissent, facing serious human rights abuse allegations.
Okay, what about Cuba? After Castro's revolution, it's faced long-term economic challenges.
It has, especially after the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 90s. Cuba lost its main benefactor. That triggered the special period. GDP reportedly fell by about 35%.
How much of that was the U.S. embargo versus the system itself?
The sources suggest both played a role. For sure, the embargo definitely hurt. But the analysis also points to inherent flaws in the communist model itself, the central planning, the lack of market incentives hindering innovation and entrepreneurship long term. Plus, the regime heavily restricted individual freedoms, political opposition, the press. Dissidents were often persecuted or exiled.
And then there's Cambodia under Pol Pot. The material described that as genocide.
It was the Khmer Rouge regime, 1975 to 1979. Their radical attempt to create this utopian rural agrarian society resulted in the deaths of an estimated 1.5 to 2 million people.
How?
Through starvation, forced labor in horrific conditions, and systematic extermination. They targeted intellectuals, professionals, ethnic minorities, anyone deemed an enemy of their revolution. Just brutal, systematic killing.
These accounts, they paint a grim picture of the impact on basic things like innovation and just, well, the motivation to work.
Exactly. That centralized nature, the lack of competition we talked about, it often leads to stagnation. Fewer incentives for creativity, for taking risks.
Because the rewards aren't there.
Right. Or the system actively discourages it. If collectivism is the absolute priority, individual ambition can be seen as suspect, Hayek wrote a lot about how this lack of personal reward or recognition dampens initiative.
It's interesting. The source material mentioned this dynamic in debates.
Yeah.
That when proponents of socialism or communism are faced with the lack of successful long-term examples, the discussion can sometimes turn into bomb throwing, just insults back and forth.
Yes, and the counter-argument often deployed is simply pointing back to these historical failures, which, serve as a stark reminder that even if the intentions behind these systems were noble, the real-world implementation often came at an absolutely devastating human cost.
Which brings us squarely to that broader human toll. The sources were quite direct, citing some truly horrifying statistics.
They were. This is a critical, sobering point. One source explicitly stated communism continues to kill people.
Yep.
And the estimated death tolls associated with 20th century socialist and communist regimes, they range massively. The figures go from 65 million up to maybe 140 million. Oppression, political purges, mass executions, engineered famines. Under leaders like Lenin, Stalin, Mao, Pol Pot, it's just chilling. Yeah. It underscores how ideologies prioritizing collective goals over individual rights, especially in their authoritarian forms, can justify extreme measures with unimaginable human suffering.
Those numbers are hard to comprehend.
Yeah.
They really give you pause. Okay, so if pure capitalism has these clear drawbacks we discussed, inequality, instability,
right,
and attempts at pure socialism and communism have often led to inefficiency and these catastrophic human tolls, what's left? Are there hybrid models, ways to bridge the gap?
Absolutely. And this is where things get really interesting, looking at models like social democracy, particularly the Nordic version.
Sweden, Norway, Denmark. People often call them socialists, right?
They do, and that's a common misconception the research really clarifies. Fundamentally, the Nordic countries operate within a capitalist framework. They have free markets, private businesses, but they combine that with really robust social safety nets, strong welfare states. That's why social democracy is a much more accurate label than pure socialism.
Okay, that distinction is crucial. So what are the key features of this social democracy model then?
Well, you've got the strong welfare state, usually funded by high taxes. This provides things like universal health care, free or heavily subsidized education, comprehensive social insurance, unemployment benefits, pensions, etc.
High taxes, but high services.
Exactly. And they often emphasize something called flexicurity.
Flexicurity.
Yeah, it's a blend. Flexible labor markets, meaning it might be easier for companies to hire and sometimes lay off workers, combined with strong social security. So if you lose your job, there's a safety net to catch you and help you retrain or find new work. It aims for both economic dynamism and social protection.
That sounds like a smart balancing act. How did this model come about historically?
It has roots in early 20th century labor movements and social reforms. Then it really solidified after World War II, during periods of strong economic growth. Figures like Gösta Rehn and Rudolf Meidner in Sweden were key architects.
Any particular leaders associated with it?
Olof Palme, who was Sweden's prime minister several times, strongly advocated for social justice and equality, but always within that capitalist framework. And academics like Gösta Esping Andersson did a lot of work analyzing how these states balance markets and social welfare.
And the results?
Yeah.
The sources suggest these countries do pretty well.
Consistently, yes. They're almost always near the top in rankings for standard of living, low poverty rates, economic equality, those comprehensive safety nets. And they consistently rank very high on global happiness indices, too.
Like the World Happiness Report.
Exactly. And economically, they're strong, high GDP per capita, generally low unemployment, so that they demonstrate you can combine market economies with strong social outcomes.
It sounds appealing, but are there criticisms? What are the downsides mentioned in the studies?
The main criticism usually revolves around the high taxes needed to fund everything. Critics argue this can potentially stifle economic growth, dampen entrepreneurship, make it harder for businesses to compete internationally.
Less incentive to work extra hard if taxes are very high.
That's the argument some make, and some studies suggest the regulatory environment can be burdensome, maybe particularly for small businesses or startups, though, again, countries like Sweden are also known for being highly innovative, so it's complex.
Okay, so the Nordic model is one powerful hybrid. But what about addressing capitalism's own flaws within its own system? Without going full social democracy, are there ways to mitigate the downsides?
Yes, definitely. And the sources highlight several strategies. First, using government tools for redistribution.
Like taxes.
Exactly. Progressive taxation is a key one, where higher earners pay a larger percentage of their income in taxes. This has roots going back to FDR's New Deal, and studies generally link it to lower inequality.
Kind of levels the playing field a bit.
That's the idea. And alongside taxes, social protection programs are crucial. Safety nets. Things that ensure access to essentials like healthcare and education.
Like Medicare and Medicaid in the U.S.
Precisely. Introduced back in 1965, they provide that baseline support for vulnerable populations.
What about non-government approaches, like philanthropy?
That's another significant factor. The wealth generated by capitalism can be channeled back into society through private philanthropy.
You see historical examples, right?
Oh, yeah. Figures like Andrew Carnegie with his Gospel of Wealth idea, John D. Rockefeller, they set up massive foundations, pouring money into education, health, social reform.
And today?
Contemporary examples like Bill Gates and his foundation's huge investments in global health show this tradition continues. It's a way wealth gets redistributed just through private initiative rather than purely government action.
A different mechanism, but similar outcome in some ways. What other models did the sources explore for making capitalism maybe fairer from within?
Employee stock ownership plans, ESOPs, came up as a really interesting model.
How do those work?
Basically, they give employees a direct stake in the company they work for through owning stock.
So employees become part owners?
Essentially, yes. And the research suggests benefits like increased productivity because employees are more invested, higher job satisfaction, lower turnover. Public supermarkets is a famous example. They've operated as an ESOP since the 70s. It aligns worker interests with company success.
That seems really smart, giving workers a piece of the pie. Are there challenges with ESOPs?
Sure. One is concentrating risk if the company does poorly. Employees' retirement savings tied up in stock can suffer, and they can be complex to manage.
Any other related ideas?
Yeah, things like worker cooperatives, which economists like Richard Wolff advocate for. Here, employees don't just own shares, they often participate directly in management decisions and share profits more broadly. These are all seen as ways to make workplaces more democratic and equitable while still functioning within a broadly capitalist economy.
Okay, we've covered systems, structures, hybrids. But the material also dug into something deeper. What these models mean for the individual. especially around concepts like freedom, work, property. It's not straightforward, is it?
Not at all. Take wage work. Karl Marx famously argued that under capitalism, it leads to alienation, workers feeling disconnected from their labor like cogs in a machine.
But is that always true today?
Well, that's the nuance. Many modern workers do find real fulfillment and meaning in their jobs, especially in fields focused on human connection like teaching or healthcare. But systemic issues remain. Think about the gig economy, precarious work, lack of benefits. Guy Standing writes about this precariat. It can definitely still lead to feelings of isolation, work just being a commodity.
So this idea that having a job automatically equals freedom of choice, it's limited.
It often is, yeah. Economic necessity is a huge factor. Labor statistics often show people stay in jobs because they have to financially, not just out of passion. And then you layer on things like discrimination, systemic barriers. These further limit real employment choices, especially for marginalized groups. William Julius Wilson's work highlights that.
Okay, and what about private property? That's like a cornerstone of capitalist freedom, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's debated.
Fiercely debated. Philosophically, yes. Thinkers like John Locke and Adam Smith linked exactly, making them hard to provide purely through the market. So taxes become necessary for a functioning society that provides those shared benefits. Paul Samuelson wrote about this public goods issue.
And speaking of shared resources, the tragedy of the commons came up. How does that fit?
Right, William Forster Lloyd's idea from way back in 1833. It describes how shared resources like common grazing land often get degraded because each individual acts in their own short-term self-interest.
Like everyone puts too many sheep on the common land until it's ruined for everyone.
That's the classic example. Overfishing is another modern one. But interestingly, Elinor Ostrom's later work, she won a Nobel for it, challenged the inevitability of this.
How so?
She showed through extensive research that communities can actually manage common resources effectively through collective governance without privatization or top-down state control. She found examples like community-run irrigation systems in Nepal, successful fishing co-ops in Alaska.
So cooperation can work. It's not just pure self-interest versus central control.
Exactly. Her work showed there's a viable, often successful third way based on local rules, trust, and shared management. It adds another layer of complexity to how we think about property and collective action.
Wow. Okay. So wrapping this all up, what does this mean for us? We've done a really deep dive here. We've looked at the theories that offer messy realities of capitalism, socialism, communism.
Yeah, we've examined the strengths, the growth, the innovation potential, and the weaknesses, the inequalities, instabilities, the potential for oppression.
And we've explored these nuanced hybrid models, like social democracy, that try to strike a balance between economic efficiency and social equity.
We've seen capitalism's power, but also its pitfalls. We've confronted the aims of socialism and communism versus the often devastating human costs and inefficiencies in their historical centralized forms.
And looked at how some systems are really trying to bridge that divide, find new ways to make things work better for more people.
It's a continuous process of adaptation and debate, really.
So, as we finish this deep dive, here's something to think about. Considering everything we've discussed, the profound triumphs, the tragic failures across history, what blend of economic principles do you think best equips societies to navigate the future? A future that's changing incredibly fast. How do we ensure both innovation and broad societal well-being for everyone?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? No easy answers, but definitely worth pondering.